Luis Enrique's PSG has just earned a well-deserved victory against Liverpool, going all the way to penalties, but deserving that victory over the two-legged tie. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing just how they have done that. From their rotations on the ball to the way they work for one another with their movement and their zone replacement, how it all comes together as a team. We're going to be speaking about that today, how they dismantled Liverpool's press and how they were able to exploit them. But before we discuss the tactics, let's take a quick look at the stats from this game, with PSG generating 2.56 XG compared to Liverpool's 1.64. PSG holding 54% possession to Liverpool's 46% possession. PSG making or generating more big chances with 4 to Liverpool's 2. And PSG also managing to take more shots with 21 over Liverpool's 19. So now, moving on to the tactics board, we're going to speak a little bit more about that zone replacement that PSG use in their build-up with their rotations on the ball to carve open the opposition and create space for them to build up. Now, a lot of this stems from their midfield movement, having the likes of Vitinha, Neves and Ruiz, who can all replace each other in their roles. But when that backline does shuffle over and somebody like Vitinha can drop into that backline with somebody like Hakimi on one side, pushing up and providing the width on the other side, it does provide that same shape, but with different players in the positions. Throughout both of the two legs, one way that PSG looked to exploit Liverpool's press in this way was having Vitinha drop in on the left side of defence to pick up the ball, with Mendes pushing slightly higher and the other players in the middle of the park looking to pin the Liverpool pivot players of McAllister and Gravenberch. This was then also followed by the wingers pinning their opposite fullbacks, making sure they couldn't jump into those wider spaces for the likes of Hakimi and Mendes, who could then make their way, especially Mendes, who was able to make his way behind that Liverpool first line of 4, who was just trying to cut off that central rotation to find himself in that space and become that free man in the build-up. With Salah now more focused on Vitinha, who's dropped into that area and he's trying to screen those passes off. You've got Gravenberch, who can't jump out because Ruiz is pinning him in there. And you've got Kvaratskhelia, who is pinning Trent on that right side, which gives Mendes that room to receive the ball, drive forward and create things from this area of space. As I said, this was a common theme throughout, and this is something that comes from having those rotations where Vitinha can drop into the last line, but you know that the other players know what's happening in that same sequence, allowing Mendes to be the one that receives the ball and become that free man, because those other midfielders, Ruiz and Neves, know exactly what to do when the rotation begins. And like I said, this isn't the only rotation that PSG use. Hakimi also pushes higher up the pitch to provide that width on the right-hand side, which means Mendes will stay in that left centre-back position to still give them that line of 3 across the back, with Vitinha sort of sitting in front, almost creating that 3-3 in midfield with Neves and Ruiz. A little bit more freedom, but the 3 of them can rotate between the depths to provide passing options for that back 3. This still allows Enrique's side to produce that 3-2 base that they're wanting to create, with Neves dropping deeper in this instance for this example, with Ruiz then able to sort of pin, again, use Gravenberch and pin him back to create that 3-2 and build up against that first line of 4 for Liverpool, giving PSG that 5v4 advantage in the first phase. But again, as I'm showing on screen here, the midfielders can interchange their positions to allow different passing angles, because all 3 of them work so hard off the ball when they lose it that it doesn't matter, because all of them can play each other's roles seamlessly, and that's a real sort of synergy thing that is working for them right now. And that's not just in the first phase of build-up in that sort of 3-2 base. As you can see here, Ruiz occupying that wide area, allowing Kvaratskhelia to sort of drift infield. Ruiz knowing that if Kvaratskhelia does drift inside, he has to hold that width to ensure that all the lanes are being occupied within that 3-2-5 structure still. So it's still about those positional aspects, but it's which players are occupying each zone. And that can switch from player to player, because each player knows that they have to carry out not only the offensive sort of instructions of the zone they're occupying, but also the defensive instructions. So, for example, if the ball does break whilst Kvaratskhelia is in that sort of more central midfield role and he's a little bit deeper, he knows he's the one that has to track back and make sure that he wins that duel, or at least commits a foul or something, in order to allow his team to reset around him. So every player knows their responsibility for each zone of the pitch, and it's really important that they all carry that out on a very connected level. Again, this was a staple throughout the entire game, with the likes of Kvaratskhelia, Dembele, even Barcola, all tracking back to help their team, really pushing intensity to win the ball back when they did lose the ball, and working hard to push backwards and sort of compress the pitch with their midfield players to ensure that they had control of certain points of the game and it didn't get out of hand. So it was very important, their work rate, off the ball, just as important as any other player on the pitch, especially Dembele, who showed, again in this second leg, just how important he can be off the ball, sort of screening those actions in the middle of the park in that false nine role. His off-the-ball play is almost as impressive as his on-the-ball play. The last thing that we're going to speak about that PSG did manage to exploit was this area of the pitch where Dembele was able to receive the ball. And again, we're going to talk about his on-ball play now, where we just spoke about a little bit more of his out-of-possession play. But this man-to-man press where all three of the PSG midfielders would drop in deep to draw that Liverpool pivot out, which would then leave almost that back four with Hakimi pushed up against the front four for PSG with Hakimi, Barcola, Dembele and Kvaratskhelia. But the fact that VVD and Konate were very sort of reluctant to jump out of this area and apply pressure on the ball, or on Dembele when he received the ball in this space, because they look to, and this is something they've had all season, where they want to keep that +1 in the back line to stop that space opening up for the wingers to either run inside to, one of the other forwards to cut across, or even a midfield runner to make that run in behind their midfield. So that's something they're very reluctant to do anyways. And this is something that continued in this game, which allowed Dembele to get on the ball and turn and make these 4v4 situations, creating these sort of artificial counter-attacking moments of 4v4s for PSG against Liverpool's backline, which they did manage to create some joy with. When you've got such attacking talent in that forward line, you're going to create chances when doing this. Just to finish off the video, we're going to discuss the three midfielders, because like I said throughout this video, the importance of them in this PSG system is just so clear. And let's start with Vitinha. 120 minutes played, 136 touches, 103 out of 111 accurate passes, so that's 93% completion, 2 key passes, 6 out of 11 long balls, but also 6 out of his 8 ground duels won and 5 tackles made in the match. Then moving on to the all-action João Neves, who again, 119 minutes played, 85 touches in the game, 57 out of 63 accurate passes played, so 90% completion for him, 3 key passes, 3 out of 3 successful dribbles, giving them that ability to sort of, that press resistance and ability to break the press when it does go man-to-man through his carrying ability. Also winning 9 of his 11 ground duels, 1 out of 1 aerial duels won, and 4 tackles made. Lastly, Fabian Ruiz, only playing the 90 minutes because Zaire-Emery did come on for extra time, but then, again, 60 touches in the game. 37 out of 45 accurate passes, so it's slightly low with 82% completion, but still 5 out of 6 ground duels won and 4 tackles made, showing his importance not only into putting a shift in the midfield, but also the intelligence, like we mentioned earlier, talking about zone replacement and his sort of ability for the team to function in that sense. So the overall technical capacity of not just the midfield, but the entire team, and also their ability to win their duels and work hard for one another, is exactly what makes this Luis Enrique PSG team tick.